Okay, I'll call the special committee of the whole meeting, council engagement session to order at 10:31 a.m. Jody?
Yep. Please note, special committee of the whole meetings are streamed live and recorded on YouTube. Attendees acknowledge that in accordance with Section 20 Sub 2 of the Access to Information Act and Section 4 Sub C of the Protection of Privacy Act, names, addresses, and other details provided when speaking at a council meeting will be publicly shared. Should you have questions related to the collection or disclosure of personal information, please contact the Legislative and Advisory Services Division for the Town of High River by sending an email to atip@highriver.ca. That's ATIPP@highriver.ca.
Thank you, Jody. We'll do the adoption of the agenda. Kathy, would you like to make that motion?
I'll give you that motion, Jenny. Or, sorry.
All in favor?
Mayor.
Carried. And item 3.1, business. Would we take that over to Sarah?
Thank you so much. Yes, we are going to be discussing the Northeast ASP project today. We're going to start with an introduction from our consultants at V3. We have Jonathan and Kristen with us today. We're going to start with a project update and a technical study overview, explaining all of the technical studies that have been completed to date. And then after a short 5-minute break, we are going to reconvene with the concept plan workshop with members of council. And then finally, we'll move into next steps and the close of the meeting. Jonathan and Kristen, do you want to start with our introduction?
Yeah, you got. Thanks, Sarah. So thank you for having us again, councils. There's some new faces since we were here last, so we're excited to start talking about this project with you. We are at the concept plan review stage, so really our intention for today is to hear your feedback on the draft concept and in order to make refinements so we can proceed with the writing of the area structure plan. So I will not repeat that agenda. Sarah's already been through it, but we have been fairly busy since we were here last, facilitating the completion of several technical reports. We'll go through each of the reports and the findings as well as the implications of those findings on the ASP in this presentation. So I won't dive too far into that. And then beyond that, we will be ready to hit the road on the area structure plan. And then when we come back in sort of late spring, early summer with the draft plan, you'll have the opportunity to review that as well. So I just wanted to take you through sort of the story of this concept plan. Really is an iterative process. We went through multiple versions with various different starting point ideas. Really, we kind of presented 3 general options, which were the river park concept, central park concept, and school concept, just as a starting point. And dove right in. So there's so many things we're going to talk about today in terms of what goes into the concept planning stages and all of the different considerations and constraints that we're working with, as well as administration and council and landowners perspectives. But a big part of that is also aligning with policy, looking at land economics, what is fiscally resilient in terms of a healthy non-residential to residential tax ratio, and all kinds of other interesting elements that make planning interesting. So you'll see we have we began with sort of a much more refined, detailed few concepts where we sketched through all of the options that we kind of envisioned for the area and then refined these into digital versions. So the town helped us narrow this down, and in conversations with the school boards, it was identified that it was desirable to have a school site in this area structure plan. So we chose to move forward with the school site concept and made several iterations and versions that we can talk through today. But ultimately, we've landed here on the preferred concept. So this is what we'll be walking you through today, and we can talk about the merits and drawbacks of this as we go. So we are also entering into our round 2 engagement, which is going to be held on Wednesday. So on Wednesday, we'll be holding a very similar presentation to today with the landowners. And then we will be moving into public engagement in the evening in an open house. And we also have a survey that will be live, and we'll report back on that in our updated What We Heard report. Okay, so I'd like to just now take some time to go through the completed technical studies, really just laying out the foundations down for the rationale behind the concept plan, and then after that we'll do a bit of an engagement activity with council to work through each of the concepts in the plan and get your feedback. So we had to complete a phase 1 ESA, environmental site assessment. This was a desktop study completed by Basin. Essentially, the purpose of an environmental site assessment is to identify any potential areas of environmental concern and also identify those areas that should have additional testing or study complete. So you'll see the little dots on the map. Those are the areas where Basin recommended phase 2 or potentially phase 3 depending on findings. Environmentals, so this is going to test soil, groundwater, air sampling, things like that, depending on what the environmental concerns were. So these will be required in these areas prior to moving forward with development. We also completed a desktop geotechnical study, which was completed by NGLO, and the purpose is to take a look at subsurface conditions, soil conditions, to determine whether or not the land is going to support foundations. Generally, the findings were that the site is going to be good for shallow or deep foundations. However, there were some current concerns about shallow water tables, some loose soil. So again, additional study is going to be required across the full ASP area before development takes place, just to understand what some of those limitations and perhaps some mitigation measures will be in that area. We also completed a historical resource overview with Bison Historical Services. So we also call this an HRO. And the purpose is to just generally identify preliminary historical and archaeological resources. Again, this was a desktop study, so the findings were to complete additional studies. We know that there are some interesting remnants of the Royal Canadian Air Force. We know that there was along the river that there's indigenous potentially resources as well. So the determination was additional study across the full study area prior to development. Basin also conducted a biophysical report, so this looks at the biophysical elements of the land, so natural areas that should be considered potentially for environmental reserve, any of those, flora or animals that should be taken into consideration. We have a few maps that I'll go through in detail here, but essentially, they again recommended a detailed biophysical assessment be completed across the board. However, you'll see there are 3 different pinpoints on the map where they specifically recommended in those areas detailed assessments. Along the river, they recommended conducting a risk matrix exercise to determine the setback requirements for development. They proposed 30 meters, but that's just the minimum that they would recommend. And then there's 2 other areas where they felt additional study would be required, including a wetland, which is up in the northeast corner there. So there were 17 wetlands identified through the biophysical impact assessment. Most of them were, they believe, non-claimable. Again, this needs to be confirmed at lower level studies, but generally shouldn't be a big issue. We also have the colonial blue heron nesting area, as well as a biodiversity zone along the river. So these are areas that you'll see in the concept plan we've identified for open space or potentially environmental reserve when we get to the open space network in those maps. Flooding obviously is a consideration for this area. We're aware that there's been berms developed along the Highwood River, which will help mitigate some of these concerns. However, there still will be need to be consideration in terms of building along those areas. And lastly, Rhineck has completed a market study background report. I believe this is still in draft, but the intent of the study is to just give us an idea of what would be a sustainable non-residential to residential land ratio in terms of tax return on those property taxes. This report recommended that we maintain 93 hectares or 230 acres of commercial and light industrial land in the Northeast ASP. Our current concept plan is at 91.6. And this is a combination of just what's on the concept plan between the commercial and employment area on there. However, your traditional neighborhood district in your land use bylaw is fairly flexible and does allow additional commercial to be developed in that area. So I believe that, you know, that number could easily be met through development in those neighborhoods as well. So coming out of the concept planning phase, we will be conducting a functional servicing study as well as a transportation impact assessment. So need a refined concept plan before we can really give detailed versions of those studies. So those are going to be our next steps. And we have a quick break here. I was fairly quick. I'm proud of myself for getting through that so fast. I wasn't sure. But why don't we maybe take a few minutes for questions if anyone has questions on any of those reports, and then we can take a quick bio break or whatever or move forward. Does anyone have any comments or questions about?
Will these additional studies that you're talking about, like, will they be done in the next phases? Or are they to be done later on?
So they would be done pending on the desire for development. So if next step, generally speaking, for the properties that are west of 112 Street is to create what we call a neighborhood outline plan. And so at neighborhood outline plan, they would need to submit this detailed studies. For the properties east of 112, we're not requiring neighborhood outline plans because they're already sort of developed into current neighborhoods. However, in those areas that are identified for future study, if they were wanting to propose a major development, then the town would likely want to see those studies conducted as well in those areas.
No, so they're not being done as part of this?
Not as part of this, no. The area structure plan is sort of a 30,000 foot in the sky look down at the land, and so that's the level of studies that we complete at this stage. Just because you don't have enough detail on what's going to potentially be built there to do additional study.
Okay.
And pretty typical studies
Yes.
for ASPs, like you
Yes.
see this.
Very typical.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Seeing no more. Yeah, let's just maybe keep rolling as everybody nod your head and through. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so based on a lot of that detail that I just shared with you, we've created a consolidated constraints and considerations map. It's a little hard to see on here. I apologize for that. I wonder if I have a laser beam. I do. So you'll see that the rookery sort of outline here, that we have a number of underground infrastructure or right-of-ways, we're not entirely sure at this point, that run through the site. We've got topography obviously sloping down into the middle center of the site, so this is a natural area for our stormwater infrastructure. And so just other general constraints that we take into consideration when preparing the land use concept. So really all of that information, our discussions with the landowners, with council, with administration, have identified quite a few of these. So traffic grid, that the town plan prefers a grid traffic orientation, which makes sense and creates nice neighborhoods with high levels of mobility. We require a 400-meter intersection setback from 498, so we couldn't have an intersection any closer to 498 than what's identified here. And again, once we do the transportation impact assessment, that number could change as well. Traffic and land use compatibility, another issue we're aware of is the concern about truck traffic coming down into residential areas. So we've attempted through this land use concept to create a concept that would encourage truck traffic to enter through this new roadway, which will connect to 24th Street, maintaining that sustainable non-residential and residential land use ratio with a healthy amount of employment area and commercial lands. The secondary school requires 20 acres of municipal reserve, so that was a big chunk of the reserve that needed to get allocated to that. Again, natural drainage and stormwater requirements, administration has directed that we create one large storm pond that connects to the current pond in Hampton Hills. So this is the reasoning for that location of the one large pond in the south. We would take into consider trail and pathway connections such as the Happy Trails network, and then obviously providing decent linkages to open space and parks throughout the neighborhood for people to enjoy. So yeah, there's lots that goes into it. There's been many iterations and versions, but anything that you're not seeing on this list of considerations that you'd like to raise?
Two things that I noticed. One is just, we met with the school board, or one of the school boards last week, and I guess it's probably flexible, but they mentioned they just needed 15 acres.
Oh, okay.
So that's
Great.
something that,
Okay.
wasn't that the number, 15?
They said 15 to 20, but I think, based upon their new concept of going 3 stories instead of
Yeah.
spread out, that 15 acres is their bare minimum.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, that's great information and relatively easy to tweak based on that.
And then the one other thing too that I have, just personally have some concerns with is that if we're taking, I like the concept of having the traffic flow out on that kind of peripheral road. But then when they enter off of the north overpass into town, they're coming right through the residential area. So is there a way we could actually mitigate that so that you had one drawing that actually showed a nice flowing road from there? They could buffer?
So the original, I'm just gonna go back, sorry, keep dizzy. So you mean the original, this is the current road
Yeah, it
network
was-
with 112
It
with
was
the
similar
school.
to that. I think you had shown us another one where it came off the highway, and I might be wrong in saying this,
Yeah.
but it actually just came off the highway and it flowed right into that peripheral road. And then, because right now the way it is, like in that top left-hand, well, even the one on the right, they come in and then heavy truck traffic comes right into residential area.
Yeah, so our intention with this sort of area, because we've talked about this quite a bit, we agree, it's easiest if they just go straight down. So how do we encourage them not to just go straight down? So I think, we're fairly confident that through policy and road design that we could mitigate those concerns. These would be wider roads to access the areas that they'd probably be accessing. It would be more difficult to, I think, access them from residential areas, but there are some design opportunities to help.
So the green though is residential, correct?
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
what
we did talk about basically severing that connection.
Yeah.
And then the roads just to the south of that
Yeah.
would run east-west until such a, exit
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
that side. So you could sever that so it's a T intersection,
Yeah,
forcing
sever
them
this
over.
here.
We'd have to, engage the engineers on that, but I think that's a possibility of just severing it, making it a T,
Because policy
forcing
means
them.
nothing to people that are driving on the road,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
They don't care
Well,
about
yeah,
speed
it would be
limits.
design the roadways to make it more, just easier for them to stay on that road, but I hear you, we could definitely do something here. We've talked about closing that extensively, so that's also an option. And then they're sort of forced into that left-hand turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, any other thoughts on, and we will talk extensively about the concept plan, but any other thoughts on constraints or other considerations of the site that you might have not discussed yet? Okay, hearing none, we will move on. Okay, we also wanted to just present to the community during this round of engagement sort of a conceptual idea of what some of the neighborhood amenities would be. Again, this is very conceptual, these locations are not going to be set in stone through policy or otherwise. They are likely going to be determined at neighborhood outline plan stage, but we did want to sort of get people excited about what this area could be. So we've identified some areas for open space and some, we have an interesting feature here with the linear park, which extends along the old runway area from the RCAF station, as well as kind of a little central park next to this high street, where they could have, not sure familiar, if you folks are familiar with the high street, and you know, some of the examples that we have could include like Britannia and Calgary, or there's a few other ones that are just, it's basically just a little connector of a bunch of different commercial businesses, just to make a little bit of a central commercial node. So we just wanted to introduce that, again, ask the public what they feel is missing, what they feel they want to see in this area. But this will not be nested in policy in any way in the area structure plan. Okay, all right. Do we want to take a quick break now? Does anyone want a break? Water? No? All right, let's just keep going.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the purpose is really to get your thoughts on the concept plan. And you'll see in front of you, we've given you little voter cards to make this hopefully fun. You can't say maybe, you can only say yes or no, I like it, I don't like it, and then we can go through a brief discussion on why you answered the way you did. So I will go through each of the neighborhood concept plan areas, and then we'll ask how you feel about them, and then we can dive into conversations on it.
Can I ask you a question about the public engagement coming up?
Yeah.
With the landowner engagement, I
Yes.
get the landowner engagement. Will it look similar to this, or will they get the thumbs up, thumbs down, or what will that engagement look like?
We don't have the thumbs up, we could.
Okay.
We don't have the thumbs up, thumbs down with them. We have a lot of targeted questions that we
Okay.
wanted to ask them. But that's not to say that we couldn't use.
No, perfect, I was just curious what their interaction is
Yes,
gonna
no,
look
it's
like.
gonna be a full workshop as well with them.
Perfect, yeah, thank you.
Okay, so the first, which is arguably the largest area, is almost 50% of the land area, which is the traditional neighborhood areas. And so this is going to be designed based off of the land use bylaw traditional neighborhood district. This district is quite flexible, allows housing, parks, pathways, the school, and neighborhood commercial. So the neighborhood, not the neighborhood commercial we've shown on the screen here, but any other small pockets of commercial that might come up based on the flexibility that's given to developers. And so, yeah, you've got quite a bit of this district already operating within the town. So this would just be an extension of that.
Yeah, typically we would show a whole bunch of kind of corner store locations, that type of thing, but with the flexibility of that traditional neighborhood district that you have, we don't need to show that in your town, which is nice. We can let the market kind of do its thing, and the developers kind of identify those in those outline plans. So we have it here. But that's not to say that you couldn't have a corner store anywhere in that TN district.
Yeah.
But the red area is sort of designed already to be that corner store.
Well, designed as more of a Main Street, like a
Coffee
centralized
shops,
commercial
that kind of-
area, yeah. So that's more of a planned area, that would be kind of the heart of the community, that's why we put it in the middle versus that corner store that could pop up, or, you know, someone cutting hair, or any kind of little corner isolated, single parcel, commercial entity could go within a traditional neighborhood district.
Okay, so this isn't the only question we can answer. You can pitch any of your thoughts in, but just generally, do you feel that the ratio of residential land in this area is appropriate? You can raise your thumbs up or down.
So you say about 49% of it is traditional.
Yeah. All right, I should get pictures of this. Okay, does anyone want to just talk about this district or what they want to see in this area, or just have any general feedback about the concept plan? Or does it look good? You don't have to vote again.
I guess it really depends, like what ends up being on the commercial side, right? Like, is people who may live or whatever goes in that very first area of traditional neighborhood, that may be an issue, right? I know, we don't, I guess it depends on how wide the street is and what that looks like, but
Yeah,
that's the only area that's sort of transitional that I could see
yeah,
being an issue. And
Sure.
of course, the trucks, when the trucks come in for.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly, and there are lots of areas, even in town where we have, residential backing or onto, employment areas similar
Yeah,
to
you're
this,
right.
and you can use, landscaping or buffering, things like that to manage, mitigate those issues, have fencing, all those kinds of things, but for sure, design considerations for that area will be needed.
So are we looking at this largely being developer driven?
Yes, yes.
I think 100% developer driven, isn't it?
Yes.
No, just for the
Yeah,
school?
indeed, it will
Yeah,
only
yeah,
develop at the
100%.
pace of the
100%, sorry, yeah, you're right,
landowner's
Vicki.
desire. Okay, well, let's move on, to the neighborhood center district. So this is that, little strip of commercial here, which we're anticipating to look like a high street, which would have businesses on both sides. It would be sort of a hub, walkable, enjoyable area to go, grab something to eat or use some services. It could also encompass residential mixed use as well, so if there was a market to have residential on top of the buildings, as long as they were within the height requirements of that area. So we really just wanted to have this area to have a commercial hub that wouldn't detract from the downtown businesses or really compete with them, but really serve those folks that are living directly in the neighborhood surrounding. So here's some pictures of what other high streets look like in other areas of Alberta. So they are usually very high designed, they often have a nice boulevard, they're very walkable, very distinct, and are a nice feature, nice community feature. Okay, do you like the idea of a high street in the neighborhood center district? Votes yes, one vote no. Okay. Well, we're doing you next, you jumped the gun. Okay, one vote no. All right, let's hear it.
Let's hear it.
Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm concerned about it pulling away from our downtown core. Since 2013, we focused on having a heart of the community. The heart of the community comes from a people-first perspective, and we made a concerted effort to have our downtown core as the heart of our community, meaning not just the center, but the community gathering place for people, for events and things to happen. When we start to do this, and give me an example of a small community that's 15 or 20,000 people that has fragmented their development areas with this centralized concept. Because to me, this is Calgary, this is Edmonton. These are bigger centers that want to capture what we have in High River already. A sense of community, a feel of small town. This to me, because you said this is going to be different than what's downtown. So you put a coffee shop there, what's different about a coffee shop there than Colossi's downtown High River? What's the difference? Put a restaurant there, what's different than the restaurant downtown? What's different than the doctor's office downtown? What's different than the arts community having something downtown versus there? I get concerned about in a small community like ours and how we are also passionate about that connection to each other and our feeling of small town. You start to do this, and I don't want to put my tinfoil hat on and start to talk about 15-minute communities, but that's where this starts to go, and I think this is outside of what High River is. We're not Calgary, and I don't necessarily think we need this because we have the traditional neighborhood district. If a coffee shop wants to pop up there and they see it being a viable entity, it's going to happen. I think centralizing something to say, here's the area where you want to build stuff, starts to pull things away. I think we're a long ways off of being a 50,000 people community, and that hub that we have right now as a downtown core is critically important to who we are, just my opinion.
So just in response, if you're, like, I know the traditional neighborhood can provide that corner store, that coffee shop within the district, but if they don't, and we don't plan for any commercial, you're a kid on a bike, you're in the north corner, where do you go?
You ever been on a bike in High River? Do you know
I
how long it
run
takes-
around High River.
Do you know how long it takes you to get from one spot to another? Not very long on a bike, right?
Do you think that kids in the northwest, in the northeast here are gonna just bike downtown?
Perhaps, yeah. We've got the structure for it, right?
No, you
I-
do, but research is showing,
I get concerned about doing this for the reasons that I gave you. I think this kind of stuff is very in vogue right now with development, right?
well, it's in vogue because we're trying to get to a world where we don't have to drive everywhere.
Yeah, but we're not Calgary, right?
No, but you still have to drive everywhere if you don't provide it.
No, you don't have to drive everywhere. You can walk, you can ride your bike, you can use your scooter. We've got all kinds of different methods of mobility, right?
Oh, I totally agree, and I'm a runner, I'm a cyclist, but the world for a lot of people is 500 meters. They don't go past that
Okay.
unless they're in a car.
Sure, if you live in Toronto. I just don't think my community is that.
Okay.
My problem is I agree with protecting downtown as a hub, but we haven't really, we don't have parking. The people in the northeast, in order to access downtown, unless they're on a bike, and you won't find someone like me on a bike, they would have to drive downtown. And we don't have the parking facility, we don't have,
Okay, where are you gonna park there?
I'm assuming each of those places would be required to have parking facilities. But we don't have parking for all of High River to congregate in downtown, we just don't.
Okay, well, you're taking that problem and you're putting it there. If you're talking about parking, if you're gonna get into that level of detail, there's gonna have to be parking there as well. So then you're assuming that everybody in that, going back to your point of having a closer community where there's, what'd you say, 500 meters?
Yeah.
So that becomes walkable, you're talking about driving. So we've lost the concept of the 500 meters of walkability then, because we're still talking about people driving to these places. We're talking about having parking.
Well, no, there'll have to be parking, for sure. You can't say we can have one or the other, that's it.
No, I'm not saying
Yeah,
no,
you
I'm not saying
are.
no parking. No, I'm not. No, that's not what I'm saying. She's saying there's no parking downtown. We all know there's parking downtown.
Got it.
So there's that argument that's happened in our community for a very long time now. You can argue whether there's enough or there's a plentiful amount of parking. You're still gonna deal with that same thing here. I'm not saying no parking, but what's the adequate amount of parking? If we're going with the concept of being walkable and having something within 500 meters that is that accessible, by using your scooter, your bike, your walk, whatever it is, you're just moving that problem to another place.
But we're growing, and just think if you have commercial there, you have the school there, the kids have half an hour to go somewhere to grab something to
Okay.
eat.
I'm not
I think
saying,
it's
I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just saying what I think this community is.
Yeah, Kathy, you had something?
Well, I just look at a different demographic, the seniors, and we have, that whole seniors develop, which is a lot of seniors, I'm not even sure, but I think it is 55 plus, in that corner right now where they can't walk for a coffee, they can't even really walk for groceries.
You're
Because there's-
talking like below.
Yeah, just below. And so, I like the idea of having some accessibility to some sort of things because it does create that sense of community and offers those people a place to go, to walk, to ride their bike or whatever. And I appreciate that, yeah, it's not that far of a bike ride or that, but, you know, I look at Monty Southgate who walks every day, but he can't have a destination because there isn't any destinations in that community for a senior like him.
But I didn't say not to have commercial, that's not what
Right,
I'm saying.
yeah, no, absolutely.
I'm saying for it to create itself.
Not just have a
Not just,
specific
just
area.
have a designated area that,
Oh, I know.
within the bylaw that we have right now, that can be created, right? Instead of creating a specific space that's set aside just for that, because then you designated it just for that. I guess I'm thinking more about it just happening more organically, where it might happen. You know, if people think there should be a coffee shop there, and people are calling for it, or with somebody then with an entrepreneurial background is probably gonna plop on there, because they go, I can make money. If we just create the space and say, okay, people are gonna fill it, you know,
But I can see it as
It-
making sense where it is, right? Personally.
making
Rather than-
sense, because it's in the
rather
middle
than
of,
just
it's
have-
in the middle of a plot of dirt,
Yeah.
sure. That makes
Rather
sense.
than just having it, I don't know, someone do it over by the dog park, right? I like the idea of having it purposeful, that this makes sense where it is and this is what we want there.
That's fine.
Can you tell me, how many people do we think will live in this area? Do we have an idea? of
Yeah.
traditional homes, or, I know that's a bit of a.
3,000 to 5,000.
Yeah.
So if you take the 154 hectares of traditional neighborhood, that at 7.5 units per hectare, which might be a little high, you get 3,500. So probably 3,000 to 5,000.
This is a side question more towards Chris and Riley. How do we have water license for 50 approximately, or annexed land for 50?
We're annexed for 50. We gotta do some work to get the water there.
Okay, I get that, but
It depends
so how
on your per
how does
meter.
adding 4,000, let's say 4,000 to be, to the additional 15 that we're now, so we're at 19, and then let's say there's another 4,000 out at Spitzy, so we're at 25. Where are we getting the other 25 in the annexed land that we have?
The other 25. Sorry.
Like 50,000 people, like
Oh,
we
yeah.
have annexed land for 50,000.
You gotta think of commercial too, though. right?
Correct.
Commercial needs water.
Montrose Hamptons.
Right, but I'm talking about annexed land. Do we not have annexed land for 50,000 people?
Split it south of 12 still.
Yeah, but we can't develop a lot more south of 12. Anyways, that's another discussion we can have.
Well, yeah, and I think, you know, I guess the other aspect of things too, right? Our traditional neighborhood district really relies kind of on that infill and variation of density, right? And so it's not necessarily always gonna be single-family homes, but again, what we also see in reality is we're not seeing in those new residential developments that we're seeing, like the Northwest or Montrose or even the Hamptons, a big influx of multifamily per se in those neighborhoods yet. So we're seeing single family and really the market really wanting to see more single family. So you gotta balance those things as we go forward. That's the value of the traditional neighborhood district to an extent, is it gives you that flexibility in its current iteration. Right? We have to also remember that we are going through a process with the community and that may change the flavor of that traditional neighborhood district slightly as well when it comes to what the density actually looks like.
Okay.
So when we talk about the annexed lands, you know, I think ideally, you know, you want to be more as efficient as possible and get the highest density as you possibly can on those annexed lands, but in reality, the market's going to bear what the market bears.
Yeah. Okay, sorry for hijacking the
That's
conversation.
okay, that's a great question. Okay, well, we've had a good amount of discussion on that, so thank you. We'll take that back. Sorry, not great on the screen here, this color. So the next area we wanted to touch on with you was the service and employment area. So this is an area generally east of 112th Street, and there's a couple parcels north as well along 498, which would give entrance to the community for those employment areas. And this is based on the service and employment district in the land use bylaw, which allows a wide range of land uses, including the current residential that's there, office, retail, manufacturing, light industrial, and institutional. So as we know, these areas, at least the ones east of 112 are currently have some development on them, so they would be sort of a transition area over time as those landowners see fit to develop in the future. So we did originally have quite a bit of employment area. It stretched all the way over here. Based on the study with Reineck and discussions with administration, we scaled it back to where it is now. So based on the current concept plan, we feel that there is an appropriate amount of service and employment area in the land use concept. Yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Does anyone have any comments about this area and sort of how we anticipate it to change over time or not change over time, or some of the
In this discussions of scaling it back, what was the reasons, and could that change if all of a sudden that whole area just sort of flourished and?
Yeah, so we scaled it back just because the town felt like there was already quite a bit of land available for service and employment in other areas that could be developed, as well as the study that was completed, the market study by Ronick, which identified 93 hectares, so that we scaled it in order to sort of match that amount. And yeah, that was basically the two main factors, was just fear of oversaturating you know, the market with those in lands and having them sit forever and ever, when perhaps residential might have more traction in those areas. Any thoughts? Okay, parks and open spaces. Have a lot, I'll go back. So what you see on the concept plan right now, the kind of little pocket parks with the dotted lines, those are all just conceptual. Those are just to give you an idea of how we could connect the different spaces. Currently in the measurement of the MR, we include those little squares and as well as the open space that's along Highwood River and along as the canal as well as around the stormwater pond, so we could kind of get to that 10%. However, at neighborhood outline plan stage, that's when those locations of those parks and trail connections would really get refined and connected to the current structure of open spaces and parks. But generally speaking, we did talk earlier about the reasoning for the MR along the river. We spoke a little bit with the landowner who had proposed some MR down here along the canal. And then we also wanted to retain some of that historical reference through the park and proposed pathway there. But any other thoughts on the open space network, or something you'd perhaps like to see that's not here?
I just have a question. Do these pocket parks actually get used? Lots of times I drive by what would be in another area, a pocket park, and they're empty. Or they're not, they don't have, say, playground equipment in them, or they just end up being square pieces of grass. What's your understanding of historically how they're used and if they're used?
So I think you need to link to your Parks and Trails master plan, which often talks about how you program different parks and how many top parks you have versus destination parks, say. There's different categories actually within your plan. I can't remember all of them right off the top. But that kind of overarching strategy is when we refer to your parks department, kind of working with them on how that balance would be. Definitely if you don't program it, it doesn't often get used. But as someone whose kids are just out of kind of the younger phase, I've got teens now, but when they were in potty training phase, I'll be really blunt. The distance to and from your house's toilet makes a big deal. And babysitting some friends the other day, there was a top park, it was 200 yards away. Perfect. We could go there, 20 minutes, go home, they get a bit of exercise, then we go back to their house, you know, potty break there. It works perfect, right? So there is that like practical element that I think these smaller parks play, and these are actually fairly large in some sense. The one showing, there could be roles for even smaller ones too, and that's where the developers would come in at the outline plan stage, really detail out how they would allocate those park spaces, and then it has to be in line with your Parks and Trails master plan. No, sorry, Kristen.
No,
sorry.
that's perfect.
Well, I think neighborhoods are often cyclical, right? Like, we had 5 years where there was no kids playing Irish Street, where now we have a dozen of them, right?
Yeah.
So I think that also impacts the usage of those spaces.
Yeah, the community life cycle is huge, and if you don't provide them at all, or if you neglect them over time, you don't get the families moving back. It's a big problem, like North American wide, is that families only wanna move into the new neighborhoods because they're designed for them, and the old neighborhoods got neglected, the schools closed, the parks closed, all that, they got repurposed. So why would you wanna move back? So that's another like maintenance thing as the community life cycle changes.
But I'll agree that with what you said, if they're designed right now, like our park, like on mine next to a park. And there's not many kids in my neighborhoods, but there's always kids in the park. Because it's been kept up, it's quite nice. There's different activities for them, they come from all over
Yeah,
to access them, so I kinda like having them all over.
yeah, it's that programming piece, yeah.
One drawback that I see is kind of like what we talked about the other day with Foothill School Division is that having, let's say on that school site, there's 2 schools and sports fields and playgrounds. In my mind, I'd rather have one spot where it's relatively central, that is attracting all of the different elements, the sports, the school, the playground, versus having a lot of top huts, because I can think of a number of them in Sunshine and Neighborhood East that I bet you as counselors, we couldn't even name all the parks, and there's some of them that never get used, right? Some of them that are 2-3 house lots that are, that we've taken playground equipment off in the last 10 years or whatever it is. I don't know.
And I think that's okay too, because like I think of Line of Acres. Line of Acres is kind of like this little subdivision, right, it has a park in the center. The park's not big, but from little kids who can play in the park and the kids who can ride their bikes, that little central area, those kids just go through there all the time, right? It's whether they're on their bikes, whether they're playing soccer, it's just always full of kids. And I couldn't imagine them having to go, say, all the way to, especially when I lived there, I was concerned about my kids crossing streets, go all the way to the school to play in the park. I probably wouldn't have allowed it, and they would have just played in the backyard. They didn't have that central park, so I like them.
We're also working within sort of the boundaries of the town plan policies, which require a park and open space within 400 meters of every residence, right? So there is a certain policy element that we also need to use. Unless council, makes amendments to the plan, we will be following those policies as well.
That's a lot of parks.
Okay, so based on that discussion, gut check, how do you feel about the parks and open spaces? You feel like there's an appropriate amount of parks and open spaces? Not enough?
Does it mean like the percentage that is expected, or is it?
Yeah, well, we could just, I think based on the conversation that we've had today, we maybe just don't even need to talk about the amount, but the approach to parks and open spaces. So we have a central sort of kind of park up here with the linear pathway. We've got parks and open spaces along the PUL and municipal reserve areas, as well as some of these connector points with other neighborhood parks.
I like it.
Awesome, okay. Thank you for participating in our thumbs up, thumbs down. Sometimes people don't like doing things, but I appreciate you. Okay, so we had good discussion, and now I'm gonna flip this over to Jonathan to talk about development sequencing and some of the challenges you're getting from A to B.
All right. So I think one of the huge challenges of this area is the divided land ownership. You don't have kind of classic suburban development with one landowner rolling through the whole thing, getting control of it all. So, and we have some existing challenges like the east side of 112th, where you have people already living there, running businesses and whatnot. And so integrating that over time is going to be really important. So, big disclaimer here, this is the future, it's hypothetical, and this scenario we created in order to get a sense for ourselves, first of all, and then for others, as to how could this area actually develop out. And sort of playing out rolling out the future helps us think through what are the pieces that we need to hone in on a bit more, that we need to get answers to. So it's not perfect, it won't be, but we hope that it can kind of roll that video, so to speak, of what the future might entail for this area. So, as mentioned, all potential sequencing here. So, for example, this could be a phase 1 where you have the southeast corner because it's connected to the storm pond. So you could get the storm pond built. We have 112th Street, which would have to be upgraded. So that would be the first phase as well. See how many things I need to click on here. So municipal reserve, as mentioned, the developer is required to dedicate 10%, a little block of it there. The High Street Road would have to be created, so that would be developer-led as well. The north-south road on the west side would have to get created. School site purchased, given to the school bodies. Whatever agreements would have to be struck there. This would likely require an over-dedication of municipal reserve by the landowner, and thus what we call endeavors to assist, an endeavor agreement would likely have to be signed such that future developers who don't have as much municipal reserve would be able to, through the town, facilitate an exchange of money so that the first phase developer could get back their over-dedication amount. We have municipal reserve around the storm pond, and then we have the storm pond, which would be a public utility lot, PUL, created. Also, that's also oversized for this area phase 1, and thus other endeavor agreements would likely have to be signed such that the other developers would then contribute to this developer because they don't have storm ponds on their land, but they're gonna use this one. Then we have kind of the east side of 112th, which if the road, that kind of truck traffic road on the far east were to be developed, if we would need, the town would need to get that land at some point in time. So if properties on the east side of 112 subdivide, the town could then take that road right of way and start to accumulate it over the phases to build the road in the future. Dedicated by plan of survey so that you have it on title.
Why that piece?
That's just an example.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that it, on the east side, if you're ever gonna get that road, you know, either you have to expropriate the land, purchase it, or take it at the time of subdivision and development. The easiest for the town is always just to take it at the time of subdivision or development. The others are more heavy-handed approaches. And so ideally, as this area develops, individual parcels on the east side would start to do more on their land, maybe split the front and the back, say, so that the town could take that little sliver of road and eventually accumulate them over time. So a few statistics here. Don't need to go into them too much, but there's an over-dedication as mentioned there. So then we get into a potential second phase, moving to the west. Here, the road on the north side could continue there to 5th Street. Upgrades to the 5th likely required. The municipal reserve around the river would need to be created, as well as the municipal reserve along the canal, and then the park there. And then, for example, another one of the landowners on 112th, perhaps they're doing something and the town is able to take that little piece of road on title in, at least. And so things that would have to go here, this, because as it stands currently, it would be a different landowner. They would pay contributions to the school, pay contributions to the storm pond, pay contributions to any roads that were done in phase 1 through agreements. And then if we think of a next phase as being kind of to speed things up, the kind of full north there, The intersection would likely have to be upgraded.
No.
No?
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Upgrades to Fifth Street and municipal reserve around the river would also need to be dedicated. Municipal reserve at that park site in the central, and the High Street completed on the north side. There, intersection upgrade potentially there as well on 438. And then the realignment of 112th Street, because currently we know that it has a nice bend to it. And then another kind of example of potentially someone on the east side of 112th develops or subdivides, and then another little bit of that road could be taken on a plan of survey. So the major pieces here: highway intersections potentially upgraded, 5th Street upgraded, 112th Street realigned, new roads built, employment area built. Then we get to east of 112th, and at some point in time, perhaps the town can execute the creation of that road, and the future vision is for service and employment area. So that road would have to be created, road dedications by plan of survey as needed. And that would complete the area structure plan, kind of full build out. And then the connection to the road. Oh, the slip ramp, which Alberta Transportation has mentioned that they wish to close at some point in the future, hence trying to make the network here connect to the street network to the south. And then, yeah, connector there. So, yeah, that's a whirlwind tour of potentially what could happen. Once again, large disclaimer that that's a hypothetical phasing approach, but hopefully it helps understand how the process may work. Sarah, Kristen, anything further on that?
I just ask, on the east side of that proposed truck traffic road, what kind of, approximately what size of property is that? What are we looking at?
What are those?
So this actually, upon request of administration, has been recommended to move farther east. We just haven't updated this plan yet. So I think the intent would be that it would run essentially parallel as a frontage road to Highway 2. So there would likely be no developed properties east of that roadway. So at this point, we had talked about maintaining properties on both sides of the roads, just because from a sort of a financial perspective, if you have, you have contributors paying to the road on both sides, but it might also be easier to have the road built if we are able to take land at the very backs of the properties where it potentially have fewer existing buildings and such. So that's kind of been in deliberations. Do you remember, Jonathan, I think there were some properties south here that we were replicating the sizes for.
Oh, okay.
So there are some existing lots farther
There are a
south.
couple acres, yeah.
Yeah, there are a few acres, but not huge. Certainly wouldn't be able to do anything too crazy there, but I think the direction, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, at this point is to actually shift this road farther over to become a frontage road along Highway 2.
That's correct, that's what we were thinking.
So in the phasing, I know it's only hypothetical, but the idea of the first phase, but it being so heavy with the reserves, is that intentional or is that just how it happened when you did that phasing?
Is really just how the design happened, yeah, because the storm plan is an extension of an existing storm plan that is gonna be connected to, so we don't really have the ability to move that. And then the school site, there
So
could be an ability to move that, I guess.
Could you move the school site on the other side to phase 2? Would that make any sense or not really?
It's possible, really trying to centralize it so that, it's not too far away from anyone.
Okay.
So that was the thinking there. Obviously, things can move for sure.
Yeah, we were
but-
also trying to maintain a connection to the high street so that if, like someone mentioned, you know, coming out of school for lunch break, they could walk without crossing any roads to that area and I mean, do what teenagers do.
Hypothetical situation.
Yeah.
The, somebody come, phase number 2, they got money, they're ready to roll. What happens then?
Yeah, so.
Can it happen?
They could move forward, like we often don't wanna quote unquote leapfrog, right?
No.
Infrastructure, but if they could make an agreement with the landowner who has the storm pond or move it, work with engineering to say, hey, what if the storm pond's on our land, we really wanna go, we got the money, we got, you know, the market analysis, can we move that storm pond? I think if they could figure that out, that wouldn't be a significant change, right? You shift that a little bit west. But yeah, it'd be the engineers that would say, does that still work if we wanted a unified storm pond connected to the storm pond to the south, which is something that we really heard from staff. So. yeah,
It makes
maybe-
sense where you got it, for sure.
Yeah, maybe you could pipe it. Yeah, I don't know.
Any other
Yeah, no more comments from me?
council? Okay. Yeah, so many clicks. So yes, the area structure plan will likely be written with a fair amount of flexibility, just so that if, you know, there is the ability for one of the landowners to come forward and contribute to helping, you know, satisfy the requirements for public utility and municipal reserve to spur development in that area. We just sort of phased it based on our understanding of where current services are located and where we would typically see. This landowner obviously is also the same landowner building Hampton Hills, so you know, they'd be connecting to their own infrastructure, so we felt like it might be rational to assume they might be the first to go, but that's not guaranteed.
D, sequence D is the section that's beside the highway. Sequence D, those property owners are really a major impetus to where we got to today, if I'm not mistaken. So having them be fourth on the totem pole, so to speak, A, B, C, D, I'm thinking they're not gonna be so tickled with that being the last. I know these phases can change and this is just a proposal, but, you know, us sitting here today and us doing this yes or no today, is a bit of chicken and egg for me, in that I wanna hear from the landowners and I wanna hear from the public engagement. Yes, as council, we have some ideas, and yes, there's some structure and some thought and some theory behind to how we build out our town. But this all came as a result of some landowners that we annexed into the community and their desire to drive this forward. So I'm really curious what everybody else's, besides us, administration council, what everybody else is gonna have to say and how that fits into this. So I appreciate all this work that you guys have done and the way this makes us think. I'm just kind of sitting back now going, okay, what are these other groups gonna say? And my next question to that is, how do we get that information after as council so that, you know, we can do all that great deliberating stuff that we have to do once we have all the information in front of us. So I appreciate this so far. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome. Yeah, just on the east side, they can go ahead as soon as the area structure plan is done if they don't need water and sewer servicing, right? Like if they got some kind of home business plus type thing, right? That they just wanna keep expanding, growing, that kind of thing, doesn't need piped water and sewer, then they can kinda move forward as is. If that area is gonna become a full piped water and sewer employment area, then there's probably not a single landowner in it based on the ownership size there, the land size, that has enough capital or enough efficiency to actually pull those services there, right? So that's sort of why it gets pushed later on. But if,
Yeah, I understand, it's
so
just.
that's
that
kind
it
of the
was-
thing, we are gonna have some interim policies, or we're proposing to have some, that will allow them to do things now, right? So that the folks there, they have, you know, existing subdivision, they have existing businesses and homes, to allow them to move forward in some way.
Thanks.
The only thing that I would ask, especially when we get to the engagement with the landowners, is that they're clear right from the get-go, the intention of moving that road to the east. I think that's a pretty significant move for everybody, and I think it makes sense in many ways, but I just wanna make sure it's clear going into those discussions with them on Wednesday.
It is a real challenge, like moving it to the east is kind of the preferred solution for sure from the town's perspective, but the reason that as consultants, we brought it forward in the middle originally was to try to really optimize the return on that road. Is that, like, you always wanna double load a road, so you're getting taxes on both sides, right? And so the further that you push it over, the more you're only getting development on one side of it, but you're still optimizing the lot size. And so I think, like, it probably doesn't matter where you put it, and putting it in the middle, obviously, you know, we see it's through buildings, that would take a long time. Over time, it might take 30, 40, 50, 80 years to actually get that built, right? So pushing it to the east does have a lot of benefit in that you can get people going sooner, you can get the road built sooner, so that's why it's.
Is that kind of the rationale, Sarah?
Yeah, that's exactly what we were thinking.
Well, it came up, we had a development further to the south, that's a multifamily development, and when we went through internal review, it was identified that, you know, while we don't have the ESP yet, and we don't know the location of this road, if we approve this now, and this is the location of the road, we're not getting that connection to 24th in the next 100 years. And so that's kind of spurred this conversation, where this road should actually be placed a little bit better, so that it gives us the ultimate flexibility from that perspective. And you know, from administration, Riley and I talked about it further to the east, it gives us that ability to leave the parcels as large as possible for those individuals, not going through the homes, but also that connection to the south. It gives us better flexibility, knowing that we don't have a development on the horizon that we have to actually take land from that's gonna affect the development quite substantially. And we don't know the exact location of that road yet. So that was one of the conversations we had internally, and so we wanna make sure that it's achievable, right? There's nothing worse than waiting for a road for 80 years. They get all pieces to it. And dealing with the traffic impacts that you actually deal with for the next 80 years.
Well, we still have 112, right?
You know, we'd still have 112, yeah, but then you're loading that with, like, James, Councilor Barton said, was you're putting, you know, heavy truck traffic down through that, and that's something we're worried about.
Well, and it's further to that point, if you actually flip it and go on the other side of the highway and you see how they've got that feeder road along there, it would almost, I'm guessing, mimic it
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I prefer, instead of and this is what my point was initially, was where it comes off of the main highway through the purple district, right? And it comes down into the residential area, yeah. Instead of having that intersection, have it more like it is on the other side, and then tie 112th into a T intersection into that.
Yeah, I think there's some details that still have to be worked on in that north leg, and how that actually flows to make it intuitive for truck traffic to go that way, right? You know, you're gonna be dealing with delivery drivers that are not necessarily here every day of the week, and the last thing you need them is going through a school zone or going into a roundabout that they can't navigate.
Look at the problems we have even on the south end of this whole feeder road at No Frills.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's where they're gonna come out the other end.
And this road's intended to solve that problem, and part of the
Obviously it
solution.
does, yeah, so I wanna make it as clear as possible. Okay?
But you're right, it has to be more intuitive, you know, 90-degree turns or,
Yep.
you know, when you're working with a B train or something along those lines.
Yep.
They can navigate it, but at the same time, not all drivers are great.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other thoughts?
One question, like, can you, and I think I know the answer, but the 10% MR paths are included in that MR as a part of the calculation?
Typically, unless they're part of a right of way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they do chew up your MR a bit, and that's always the trade-off, right? Park space versus getting to the park off-street, right?
Yeah.
Which we all probably agree is safer, it's nicer, but that uses up your MR, so.
Yeah. But it's also nice, I think, in some communities where you take something like Montrose, or you take some areas, I'm just thinking specifically in Okotoks, where they have these little MR pathways that are connecting the neighborhoods or even roads in between and. Yeah, okay,
I think there's a lot of trust in developers to build the right community too,
Yeah.
right? And I think, you know, that's something policy framework can help us encourage,
yeah,
and have them see the value of going above and beyond the 10% MR.
yeah. That's.
Because there is distinct value for their subdivision and their sales, it does come back
100%.
when they go above the 10% MR, and especially those small portions that are right-of-ways for pathways, to have that alternate network to move people around from space to space.
Just not all developers we've had in High River see that value, they just see a plot of land and put grass seed in here the cheapest possible, right?
That's the fair point.
It's happened too many times, so.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
No?
Do you guys have anything else?
That's it on our end. I can quickly go through next steps. I'm not reading through all this. Things again, but you have it in your paper copy. Perfect. All right, thank you. So on Wednesday we'll have a very similar experience with the landowners. We'll be talking in detail about the concept plan as well as the other technical report findings, and then followed by the open house, and then we'll move back into refining the area structure plan, and hopefully we can have a draft plan in the next few months that we can bring to public as well. So this is great. We get 3 rounds of public engagement. We often, as consultants, don't get to do 3 rounds of engagement, so I think this is really wonderful to have the opportunity to bring the concept to the community and then bring the full plan. It gives them a really good idea of the process and how we got to where we ended up. So looking forward to that round, and then summer for approval. I'm not gonna put a date on it, but that is our goal. So thank you very much for your time. It was great to meet the new folks and see some old faces, and yeah, we will be in touch via the town.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll adjourn the meeting at 11:44.
And on time.